Welcome to our podcast. Today we're going to be discussing how police officers feel about death and their discipline. We're going to be interviewing two officers from different parts of the United States.
We will be looking at similarities and differences in their experiences and drawing conclusions from the information that we get. Hope you enjoy!
These are their stories. Dun dun!
Hello, my name is Kiley Barber.
And I'm Austin Lorenz.
And today we're going to be talking about two very special police officers. In order to keep their identities safe, we are going to give them names pertaining to the state that they work in. So one officer will be known as Officer Idaho and the other Officer California. These officers are pretty special to Austin and my life. They're actually our dads. So before we get into details about their lives, we wanted to quickly share our backstories about growing up in law enforcement families.
Growing up, I never really understood what my dad was doing when he was going out being a police officer. I thought he was always just going out and capturing all the bad guys. But as I grew older, I realized that he was protecting and serving his community with the risk of losing his own life and possibly not coming back.
It was definitely scary growing up in a law enforcement family. I mean, you get used to seeing your dad go out the door every day in his uniform and knowing that he's doing good for the community, but at the same time, it's so scary not knowing whether your dad may come home that night or whether something may happen to him where he gets put into a situation and he could lose his life.
My dad has been working at his department for over 20 years now, and he started when he was in his young 20s after coming out of the Air Force. And he started at the rank of officer and worked all the way up. And now he's at a very high position at the rank of deputy chief, next in line to be chief in his department. And throughout his time there, he's worked in SWAT, in gang units, and detective units, and just about anything you can imagine working in a police department. So he's really seen it all and experienced a lot with death and possibly risking his own life.
My dad actually came into the department as an exercise physiologist. He had been working at a sports medicine institute for multiple years. And he came in, started working patrol, and absolutely loved it. He worked there for a very long time, decided to take a break. He was a student resource officer at a high school, decided that he wanted to go back to patrol. He did horse patrol, he did bike patrol, he drove cars. I mean, he was all over the place. He absolutely loved it. He ended up recently taking a position running the academy and just wasn't feeling it. It wasn't what he loved to do, and now he's back on patrol again with a couple years left before he retires. He's been on the SWAT team pretty much the whole time he's been working at the department, and yeah, he's been in a lot of high-risk situations as well, just like Austin's father. So just from that, we can really draw a lot of similarities between our dads.
Yeah, like already you can see that they're both fathers of two children. They've been in SWAT in their police department, so they've been in pretty high-risk situations.
Yeah, they've both been working at their stations for about the same amount of time, so they've really gotten quite a bit of the same experience. They're both pretty close to retiring, and they both hold really respectable places at their departments.
So now let's get into the actual interviews where we're going to ask the officers a couple questions about what their job is and what they do on a daily basis and ask them about how they experience death while they're working. And we're going to start by Kiley asking her father, Officer Idaho, a question, and it'll be followed by his answer. And then Officer California's answer will be played right after.
So, what is the city that you work for like including the demographics, such as population, crime rate, and environmental factors?
So the city that I work for has about 200,000 people in it, but on any given day, the impact area can be 350 to 400,000 people. that move through the city and about the city that we can respond to. Agency has about 300 sworn officers. Yeah, so we're in a kind of an isolated area. So, I mean, our impact area doesn't have a lot of impact areas nearby. Like, Salt Lake is, 350 miles away. Portland's, 500 miles away. So, I mean, it's just we're kind of in an isolated area. And we have, a normal environment where, get all four seasons. We have mountains, we have rivers, we have lakes, and things like that. But my agency generally doesn't deal with those. That would be the mountains, the rivers, and the lakes. It all would be dealt by with the county. We just deal with the city.
And now, Officer California.
So the first question is, what is a city that you work for like? What are the demographics of it, like the population, the crime rate, any other outside factors that affect what you do?
I work for the city of Ontario in California. The demographics is it's about 70% Hispanic. Most of the members there are middle to low class. It used to be a migrant community where a lot of the people would work in the dairy farms that were in the south part of town. Now, as the economy's improved, growth has happened, the south part of town is now becoming residential. The east part of town is industrial and commercial. There's about 200,000 population that live in Ontario, and during the daytime, the population will triple due to jobs.
So, what is your attitude towards death while you're on the job?
Well, it's definitely different. When I'm on the job, it's more of a professional attitude that I have. I mean, we see a lot of death. We see a lot of suicides. We see a lot of just what's called an unattended death when somebody just dies. And if nobody's around, then we have to go in and kind of investigate to make sure that they did die of natural causes and it wasn't any foul play. And then there's also, the murders that we have and even the police shootings that we have. But, when I'm on duty, it rarely gets me and makes me sentimental about any of them because it's all part of the job, in some way. I've got to be professional. When I go in and see an unattended death of an older elderly person who just passed away, it's sad. But I mean, I can't find it sad. I got to go in and look at the scene and try to just make sure that everything is, on the up and up, and there was no foul play. And the same with even a suicide. Some of the suicides are pretty gruesome, but you got to kind of deal with them. You got the family and everything you got to deal with. And you got to stay professional on that. And so, and then, like I said, with the murders and the officer-involved shooting, it's kind of the same way. You have to maintain a professional attitude all the time.
So how does that differ from death that you experience when you're not on the job?
If I'm not on the job, then, I think I'm a lot more emotional about death. It's a lot more personal to me. And it's, I think I tend to reflect on things like, I think about, I wonder how they were, and I think about other things that are from not the professional side. And so, it's a lot more emotional to me, and when I'm off duty than when I'm on duty.
With that being said, does your department's attitude, is it similar to yours, or how do they typically act towards death?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the way that they want us to be is, you want to be, you want to have some emotions, but you got to remain professional. That's what they want to see. We need to, and I think people appreciate that. People don't want to have the cops walking around joking and laughing and talking or crying and, emotional or anything. I think it helps the people that we come in and we are professional. And that's what we're expected, is to come in and do our job, be professional, be polite, be courteous, be considerate, and then, help them through our tough time.
What is your attitude towards death while you're on the job?
When you're on the job, death is pretty much indifferent. You have to separate yourself from the situation. Death is just part of the investigation that you have to figure out. Was it criminal in nature? Was it a medical issue? Was it an accident?
So compared to that, how does it differ while you're off the job and in your personal life?
If it affects my family, it's much different. That affects you emotionally. That's your family. That's the loved one that you won't get to see anymore. If it's not related to my family or somebody close or a friend to me, I'm pretty indifferent to it as well. It doesn't bother me that much.
Would you say that your attitude while you're on the job represents how most of the department feels about death?
Yes, most officers definitely are able to separate themselves from the situation. The only time it becomes difficult, let's say, if there's a child that was killed and you have small children, or you have sons or daughters, and you're able to relate to the parents' grief. Although you have to separate yourself, it still affects you a little bit more. If it's two gang members that kill each other, it doesn't really bother you that much.
So, what kind of death do you most commonly deal with on the job? Like, do you ever find yourself at a call that seems kind of funny or weird or sad or maybe off the wall? What have you experienced?
It's probably about even here on what we see. I mean, we don't have a whole lot of murders. We don't have a whole lot of officer-involved shootings. It's probably about even though on unattended deaths, which, like I said, is just when people just die from whatever, some kind of illness they've had or just of natural causes. And then it's right mixed though with suicide because for some reason seems like there's a lot of suicides. So I would say we see probably about 50-50, maybe like 60-40 of the unattended deaths are a little bit more than the suicides, but those are the two that we mainly deal with a lot. And yeah, you find all different kinds of scenarios from, really tragic scenes to some pretty off the wall and crazy elaborate scenes. So, you just got to be prepared for all of it.
So what kind of death do you deal with most commonly? Is it what's the cause of it?
Most of us are due to traffic accidents. So I believe we've had 22 fatalities in traffic accidents and 16 homicides. And year over year, most of the time in the city of Ontario, it's traffic accidents.
Going off that, have you ever witnessed any death that was weird in any way or kind of unique in its own way?
Yeah, we walked into a house where a lady had a drug overdose, but she was trying to brush her hair. So as she was in her bathroom, if you can picture it, the back of her body was against the door. It was a narrow bathroom. Her upper body was bent in a 90-degree angle. Her hand was still holding the brush when she was brushing her hair, and her body was slumped over the sink. It didn't look real whatsoever. And the whole time I was there, she never let go of the brush. Kind of weird.
Have you ever been in a situation where you've literally witnessed a death, and if so, what were your feelings in that moment?
Well, I've been an officer for 24 years, so yeah, I witnessed a lot of firsthand death in different situations, and all of them have been different. Being on the SWAT team, that I was been on the scene for a lot of shootings and self-inflicted gunshots, that were done right in front of us. And it all just kind of depends, there's been some situations where, we had a guy break into a house and shoot some innocent people and shoot out with police, and he ended up accidentally blowing his head off while I was looking through my sniper scope right at him. And that one, I was kind of relieved because, this guy wasn't going to give up, and he'd already shown how bad of a bad guy he is. So I was actually kind of relieved when it happened. And, I wasn't happy that he blew his head off, but it was kind of like, you know what? That was a good ending to a good situation, to a bad situation that he had created. And in some of the other shootouts or shootings that I've been in, it's the same way. If this guy is choosing to shoot at innocent people and choosing to shoot at the police, and choosing it's a choice that he's making, and he has to deal with the consequences that happen. So if the consequences are death, I mean, I don't feel bad. It's like he put himself in that situation. He chose to put himself in that situation, so he is choosing to deal with the consequences. And if the consequences are his death, I don't feel bad about that at all.
Have you ever witnessed death firsthand, and how were you feeling in the moment when you witnessed it?
I have not witnessed somebody die right in front of my face. I have seen somebody immediately after they died. One guy took me his head with the shotgun, which there was matter everywhere. It actually didn't even look real. His head that looked like a cartoon character. But I haven't actually seen somebody.
How did you feel when you saw the guy right after he killed himself?
Emotionally, he decided to do what he wanted to do. It didn't really affect me one way or the other. I mean, you have a soft spot because unfortunately that person was hurting so bad that they thought that was the only way that they could handle the situation. And, it's sad that somebody decides to hurt themselves, but if they're going to do it, I would rather they do it that way than hurt somebody else and then hurt themselves.
Obviously, you work a very high-risk job. I was just wondering, are the risks that you put yourself into worth the rewards that you get out of working this type of job?
So my answer would be yes. I mean, a lot of times, you don't see the rewards or feel the rewards, but when you do, it really does make you feel good. But and you say it's a high risk job, and I don't really view it that way. If you work with really good officer safety and you work with really good other officers, and have a good team, I think you really do minimize the risks that you have. That's why you often see 2 or 3 officers go into a call, and that's because everybody's got everybody's back. And one bad guy is not going to attack 3 cops. And so you can really alleviate a lot of the risk and make. And so I like to view the job more as an exciting job. I mean, I don't like the 9 to 5 job. I mean, I like going to work and having no idea what I'm going to deal with tonight. I might do nothing and I might do the craziest things in the world, but that's the way I view the job more. And so I mean, like I said, if we alleviate the risks, I enjoy the excitement of the job, and I do enjoy the benefits when you really do honestly help somebody out.
All right, so this last one is death pertaining to yourself. We know that you work a high-risk job as a police officer. Are the risks worth the rewards?
Yeah, worth the rewards because you're helping other people. And if I were to die at work, it would most likely be because I was saving someone else. The job, is going to put additional stress on you, whether you die from a bullet, whether you die from stress, have a heart attack, stroke out, whatever. You always know that risk factor is there, but when you're doing a job that there's something different every single day, every single minute, you don't know what's going to happen, and it provides you the means to take care of your own family, and it's all worth it.
So after listening to these interviews, we can look at the first similarity that came up between the 2 officers, and that was the size of the city. They said that their city that they work in is around 200,000 people and increases as the day goes based on people coming to their jobs.
Also, going off that, though, we can find differences when they discussed that. One of those being the actual demographic of the population. So, Officer California said that his was more of a Hispanic community, used to be a lot of migrant workers, whereas Officer Idaho deals with more of a mixed community and does not focus so much on a specific type of person.
The difference in the city is due to the location. So in the northwest part of the country, it's more isolated and more on its own, as Officer Idaho was saying, compared to in the southwest where there's multiple big cities all around it that are all similar in size.
The next question that we asked them regarding their attitude towards death, both on the job and off the job, we actually found pretty much all similarities with that, including both of them being pretty indifferent to the deaths that are happening on the job and really try to push aside their emotions due to the fact that their job is to solve the problem, not to deal with the feelings that are associated with the death.
And with that, we also saw that they both said that their departments agree with how they feel um, pertaining to death. So we can kind of assume that all officers feel this way and are able to push aside their emotions in order to do their job.
The last thing also tying into this is they both discussed that when it was a bad guy who was the one that was dying, they didn't really feel remorse for that death just because they felt like that was the consequence for that person of putting their community at risk.
Another difference that we saw is the types of deaths that they both encountered in their communities, where Officer Idaho saw more of the deaths were unattended deaths and suicides, while Officer California witnessed a lot of deaths pertaining to traffic accidents, which proves that California drivers are the worst.
Building off of that, too, the next question that we brought up was asking them if they had actually witnessed death. And a big difference that we found there was that Officer Idaho had witnessed multiple deaths through both patrol and SWAT, and he brought up that he seemed to have a lot of experience with death because of that, whereas Officer California had not actually witnessed a death firsthand, but rather immediately after, and he discussed what the feelings were like seeing that death afterwards, but not actually being there to see it.
The last question that we talked to the two officers about is probably one of the most important ones pertaining to, is the risk worth the reward? And they both agreed that it is. They love their job and they accepted the fact that they need to be willing to risk their own lives in order to save someone else. And that is pretty heroic, being able to put aside their own life in order to help other people and make other people feel safe in their daily lives. Coming to a conclusion from what we heard from the officers, we can see that there were some differences, but for the most part, there's a lot of similarities that they encounter with their emotions and how they feel about death. And even though that they are from different locations with different demographics, they do experience, for the most part, a lot of the same things and feel the same way towards death.
And that's all we have for you guys today. Thank you for listening to our podcast.